Tonight on the All Kinds Weather Forecast, we preview the 54th all-time meeting between Tennessee and Florida. The Gators go to Knoxville. Can they pull off a big upset? We'll preview it all here tonight on the All Kinds Weather Forecast. And welcome into another episode of the In All Kinds of Weather Forecast. I am your host, Chris Yanes, alongside my co-host, Neil Schulman, here in the heart of Gator Nation, a Gator Nation that is currently going through the brunt of Hurricane Milton as we record this podcast. So all of our thoughts and prayers are with Gator Nation and really the whole state of Florida tonight, as we are now within hours of its landfall along the West Coast. So we ask everybody, please stay safe. And we wish all of you and your families all of the best during this time. Now, before we get into the show tonight as well, we want to make sure that if you're not already and you're watching the show, hit that subscribe button down below, like this show, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think the Gators need to do to pull off the upset in Knoxville this Saturday night. And, of course, we've got to shout out our sponsor for the show. The In All Kinds Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants. And they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's savings for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, contact them at 866-998-5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. And of course, people maybe that are watching on YouTube tonight might recognize a little bit of a different background from me. I was evacuated safe and sound here to the East Coast of Florida. So a little bit of a different thing, but excited to be able to still do this podcast with you all tonight to preview the Tennessee game. And I think a lot of people in the state of Florida, honestly, regardless of the outcome Saturday, are probably looking forward to just watching football on Saturday to get their mind off everything, all the anxiety from this past week. So, Neil, we got a game this week. The Gators, for the 54th all-time, will be meeting with the Tennessee Volunteers. Florida, of course, now boasting an impressive 32-21 record in the series. They've won 17 of the last 19 matchup. Those two losses coming in 2016 and 2004, or 2022 and 2016. And then if you want to go back to that 20th matchup, it was in 2004 where the Gators fell in Knoxville as well. They will be going back to Knoxville this time. The last time they were there, they lost 38-33 in a last, really a furious comeback at the end and nearly hit a Hail Mary on the last play. But Billy Napier will look to get his first road victory against the Vols in Knoxville
or against any rival for that matter.
Yeah, that is also true. Yeah, the only time he beat a rival was last year against Tennessee in the Swamp, where the Gators won 29-16, and arguably, to date, Billy Napier's most impressive win as the Florida Gators head coach. Florida, of course, we all know, Neil, historical dominance. We just talked about the 17 out of 19, but if you want to go even further behind that, outside of the two-game win streak between 2003 and 2004 for Tennessee, Florida dominated this rivalry from 1990 to 2002, only losing in 1990, 1992, 1998. And then, of course, the run that probably hurts the most in 2001 when they ruined Florida's national title hopes and maybe Rex Grossman's Heisman Trophy bid. So I think it's maybe good to start off tonight with the dominance that Florida has exerted in this Tennessee rivalry and maybe talk a little bit about some of the best moments of this rivalry, because I think if you ask a lot of Gator fans out there, their favorite memory tends to be actually in this game.
Yeah, it's definitely ranking high on my list for my favorite moments because the first time I ever watched a Gator football game in the Swamp from like field level. I mean, I'd been to a game before, but never from this close. Was the 2017 Florida Tennessee game, and the Tyree Cleveland catch was, I kid you not, 30 feet away from me, 40 feet away from me, where he caught the ball in the end zone. So that's something I'll never forget. That's got to be up there with my greatest Gator memories. Another one actually probably happened 6 months before that. Chris Chioz's miracle. I was also in there in the building for
Mhm.
the game winner against Wisconsin in the Sweet 16, talking basketball now. But two of the craziest memories in my lifetime with any Gator sports happened in the span of 6 months, the latter of which was this incredible game. Remember, this was also on the heels of another hurricane. This was Irma that had just barreled through the state too. The stadium was
Mhm.
not full as a result of that. It was loud. The fans did their part, but not as loud as it would have been or could have been if not for not another natural disaster. But Florida's domination of Tennessee is really the talking point because it's something that we take for granted and probably shouldn't. Because the crazy thing to me is how bad, how horrendous Florida has been in a lot of the years in which they've beaten Tennessee. 2010 was the start of the downfall with the Steve Adazio mess of an offense, the three bows, I like to call it. The very next year, we were even worse. 2013, we were a train wreck, went 4-8. 2014, we were barely any better. 2017, another train wreck with the credit card fraud derailing the season before it even started and then just getting worse from there. Still beat the Vols in all those years. That's amazing. Tennessee was better than us, I think, in certainly 2013. But we beat them because we caught them early. I guess you can say 2021, we were better, or they were better than us too. I mean, Florida kind of let the wheels come off at the end there under Dan Mullen, but Tennessee got better as the season went along. Florida got worse. Florida still beat them down 38-14. And then a year ago, Tennessee clearly was better than us. Some of the regular season told us that. Florida still beat them down in Gainesville, which is just incredible. Think about that. All those years I just listed off, Florida had 5 losses or more, in some cases 7, and they still beat Tennessee. And it's not just 5 of the last 6 or 17 of the last 19, like most people like to talk about. This domination of the Vols is is almost ancient. And for those who don't know their history, the Vietnam War, I like to cite wars as my jumping off ground, historically speaking, because there are wars going on right now, so people are going to remember them in the history books down the road. So
Neil is not pro war for any of our listeners or watchers
no,
out there.
not in the slightest bit. But wars do serve as great historical benchmark points. So the Vietnam War ended in 1975, and since the fall of Saigon, Florida is 30-8 against Tennessee.
It's insane. It really is
It's
insane.
incredible. That's absolutely insane. They've won 30 of the last 38 games. It's way more than just the last 19 games. You think about Peyton Manning going 0-4 against Florida.
Hmm.
There was also in there before they were even annual opponents, a 4-game winning streak for Florida spaced out between 1976 to 1985. There was the 11-game streak that we all know in 2005 to 2015, and then the other 5-game winning streak from 17 to 21. And it's the way that Tennessee lost in some of those games. We talk about memories. Florida blitzkrieging Tennessee with 24 straight in 2012. That was pretty awesome. Or
I was there. I was there
you
row
were in
one.
you were in Rocky Top then.
My only trip to Rocky Top, and honestly, one of my favorite memories of a Gator game was probably that one in 2012. My fraternity
Yeah.
road tripped up for it, and I always tell people this because fraternities are supposed to be there's this brotherhood. No matter like different schools, there's a brotherhood. There's an understanding there. And Tennessee, we were staying 5 miles in downtown Tennessee. Like downtown Tennessee, Knoxville is 5 miles from campus, so we were actually staying downtown. We got dropped off at the fraternity house, and we were expected to be given rides back from the house after the game to our hotel. Well, they were really nice to us before the game. And then, because I think they thought they were going to win that game. Game day was there. There was a lot of hype around Dooley in that season that this was finally, they were going to turn it around. And when we pulled that
Oh
off at the end,
no,
we
I
just
know.
absolutely, we were forced to walk home.
Yep.
And honestly, it was the best 5 mile walk of my life because there was no better taste than victory we just absolutely obliterated them in the second half. I'll still never forget Trey Burton running down the sideline right by me, scoring that touchdown on the Wildcat play. Sharif Floyd and I think Dominic Easley were on my left and my right in the front row. I got to find it. If I can find it, Neil, I'll send you the picture. You can tweet it out. One of the best, honestly, experiences you could ever have as a Gator fan was that night in Knoxville, and my one time there was worth it. It was truly worth it.
Oh, that call on that run. Burton takes off on the sideline, broke a tackle. Burton might go. What a run! Touchdown, Brad
Yeah,
Nessler. And then
Nestler, one
there's
of the goats.
the girl going crazy. She's like,
Oh yeah, I
"Oozing,
think
oozing, oozing."
she probably was like a few rows behind me. Yeah.
That was yeah, I'll never forget that. But that's the thing. There are so many unforgettables in this game.
So for me, because I think this came up today, shout out, I think it's Gator Ryan, not Gator Ryan, but one of the Ryans on Twitter put out
Ryan
like
McCormick.
three. Right. Okay. So Ryan put out three memories. He said, "What's your favorite?" It was the 2015 Greer to Callaway, the heave to Cleve, and the 2000 catch.
The
Uh,
catch, Jabbar
which
Gaffney. Yeah.
which it was a catch. It was definitely a catch. I think if I had to rank them, I would say I was there for Greer to Callaway and I was there for Heave to Cleve. Obviously, I was old enough to remember the 2001 Jesse Palmer to Jabbar Gaffney. I would say Greer to Callaway one for me. Then I would go the catch, and then I would go Heave to Cleve. And the thing that people have to realize about the one in 2000, the Gators won an SEC championship because of that play. They won the East. They would not have won the East if they had fallen to Tennessee that year. And that gave Steve Spurrier his sixth and final SEC championship win. It was actually with one of the youngest SEC championship squads to do it. So pretty special moment actually. And just as a young Gator fan, seeing that play happen and the significance of going into Knoxville and winning that game 2 years removed from the heartbreaker when we had the streak snapped on the miss kick in overtime. And then, but the Greer to Callaway, I don't think I've ever seen the swamp because I was there for both the Hail Mary and that play. I would say the swamp was more bonkers on the Greer to Callaway play. Like, I mean, there were grown men falling down the aisles next to me and like, just absolutely getting scraped up, bleeding from the arms and the legs because they just fallen on the concrete and they didn't care. They was just pure adrenaline rush of like euphoria when that happened.
And yet Florida almost lost that game. That wasn't game over. They got in field goal range for
Yeah, you're
Aaron
right.
Medley, and he almost hit that.
The
So
second try, because
I was
remember we
probably
iced him the first one and he missed badly, and then the second one came even
he came
closer.
very and I
Um,
was probably the only Gator fan out there who was not celebrating on the Callaway touchdown. So I'm like, oh no, there's still a minute and a half for
yeah,
them. This is not over. And then as they start driving, I'm like, oh God, this is not gonna go well. And I was thinking, like, of all ways for the streak to end, it was at 10 at that point, heading into that game. I was thinking this has to be how it ends. For all the misery we have rained down upon them, it would be fitting for them to do it in a devastating fashion to us after we are going bonkers to for them to then just rip our souls out. That would be the situation that I think is most fitting. And honestly, that kind of is what happened the next year when we were up 21
yeah,
nothing and we thought we were going to blow them the
blew
kingdom
it.
come and we lose.
Yep.
That's no, that's fitting. But I mean, to me, like those games are the low hanging fruits. How about some of the like almost random memories, like with Ron Zook going to Knoxville and then just
Mhm.
blowing their doors
In a
off in
monsoon.
2002? Yeah, 30-13, a beating of it. That's another game where Tennessee was better than Florida, and we just absolutely demolished them. How about, I mean, Peyton Manning going 0-4 is kind of
Oh
low.
six was another one that comes to mind where
Yep, the fourth and
We
one, the
we
fourth
came
and one with
back.
Tebow, sure.
Yep. Yep.
2008 was one of the funnier ones because Florida goes up 17 nothing after one quarter, and then they just stop caring and they just mess around for the remainder of the game. And the fans, I think, could sense it, and they were booing their own team. And this is the days like before Twitter and Facebook was like still popular then, but I was mostly on like ESPN chat rooms instead of Twitter. And the Tennessee fans in that ESPN chat room were losing their minds. They're like, Florida is not going to use the word, but Florida is effing with us. Florida is just mind effing us. This is not fair. They could beat us by 70 if they want. They're choosing not to, and that is more insulting than if they just blew us out. So that was
That was kind of
hilarious.
well, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of Phil Fulmer
Yep.
because he resigned by the end of the season, and then in comes the guy that we know now, Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, the guy that we want. Oh, how the turntables, to quote Michael Scott.
Yep.
That is such a crazy reversal. But
And
all right,
that
all
I was
right,
going
go
to say
ahead.
the last thing I was going to say that in the following year, that was kind of crazy too, with all the smack talk in the offseason, Lane
Yeah.
Kiffin accusing Urban Meyer of like breaking recruiting rules and then
Yep.
saying how they were going
Singing
to sing
Rocky
Rocky
Top all
Top.
night long. Yeah.
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 And they did give us a game there in the Swamp, more so than it probably should have been. But at the end, the better team won that game in the
Well, so
Swamp.
that's the thing. It was ugly for a while, but the part people forget is all right, it's 16-6. It's ugly as all get out. But then Jeff Demp scores late in the third quarter and it's 23-6. And you're thinking, all right, 23-6 after three. Let's win the fourth quarter 14-0, which is reasonable, feasible, and you win the game 37-6. That's good enough. A 30-point win. If you can't be happy about winning a game by 30, that's kind of that's a you problem. But I thought for a moment, all right, it took longer than we thought, but here comes the beating. And then it got worse. We fumbled. Tebow fumbled away. Montario Hardesty scored, and it became a 10-point game. We wound up taking knees at the end in the game. We thought we were going to run the score up. But all right, some other memories that we got to mention. Joey Kent getting plastered in 1995 by Lawrence
Yep.
Wright in a game that we're talking about, the 2012 game where we ran off 24 in a row. We think 24 is an onslaught. How about twice that? Florida
Yep.
put 48 unanswered on Tennessee in that 95 game, another rainstorm game in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. How about Jeff Driscoll just not doing a good job at all and getting benched by
For
or
Treon
Treon
Harris.
Harris in the fourth
Yep.
quarter, down 9-0, and we come back and win the game with Treon Harris. We all seen what Treon Harris could do as a quarterback. He's not that good. Well,
Nope.
he looked at that day. And then Austin Harden, of all people, coming through with that last I think it was 6 minutes to go, that late field goal to finish it off. As you mentioned, the two 63-yard touchdowns to beat Tennessee. What else? What else am I missing?
That's really the meat. I mean, that was I would say like 17 was like, or I guess
Oh, 05,
2018.
05, the
Okay.
sledgehammer game when Urban Meyer says those are two sledgehammers going back and forth with each other all night. When I think they had
Yeah.
like minus 19 rushing yards or something
Yeah.
like something crazy like that, and Florida blocked a kick. That was like the true birth of his special teams genius coming out
They
and
muffed
like
a punt
announcing
too. I
itself.
think they
Yeah,
muffed a punt
and
and
then
set
that was
us
it. It was
up.
a
Yeah.
punt. That's right. That's right. That's right. Um,
I'd say 18 was a good one because that was the one
yeah.
where I think Tennessee also was favored in that game, and Mullen just, the defense played lights out. That was one of maybe the best game of the Todd Grantham era. Enforcing Jared Garantano couldn't do anything right. There was the fumble right before their tight end scored on the goal line, and they fumbled it in the back of the end zone. And Florida would go on to win in a huge game, just 2 weeks removed from the Florida's first loss in 31 years to Kentucky. So I'd say that was maybe like the last big one because like really like ever like 1920 were blowouts. They weren't really close. 21 was a blowout, wasn't close at home. 22 was the one we lost. We almost came back and won. And then last year, Florida controlled the game, much like the UCF game last week, and they just kind of took their foot off the gas
Oh,
in the second
and
half.
how could I forget the Alex Brown game?
Oh, 99. Yep.
Our multi-time guest on the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. We got to get him back
Yep.
one of these days. Yeah, 5 sacks in one game.
Yep.
Incredible, incredible.
Yep.
But Chris, history can predict the future, but does not guarantee it. So
Yep.
we got
Absolutely.
we got a new chapter to write this weekend.
We do indeed. So 2024 is here. The Florida Gators do travel to Knoxville this weekend. And as you can tell, just the way Neil and I just went down memory lane, we love this rivalry. This is a fun matchup. It's a little weird that it's happening in mid-October, but Neil, that might actually work to the Gators' advantage because the Gators, if they had played this game in the middle of September, I don't think they would have fared as well. But because the season it's gone the way it's gone, Tennessee started hot, but has kind of tailed off here in the last few weeks. And the Gators now are coming off 2 consecutive wins for the first time since early 2023. And they looked really good last week in the swamp. So we're hoping to see some of that momentum that they've been able to get over the last few weeks carries into this game now. But let's talk about Tennessee a little bit. So obviously, everybody knows Tennessee to date up until last week was steamrolling teams 4-0, beating Chattanooga 69-3. At the time, they beat the number 24 ranked NC State 51-10. They beat Kent State 71-0, in which they were up 65-0 at half. They grinded out, I think, a tough defensive game against Oklahoma on the road, 25-15. That's a really good SEC road win now that Oklahoma's in the SEC. But of course, those were the offensive struggles that we saw in that game carried over to the following week against Arkansas, where they fell on a last-minute touchdown by Arkansas in 1914. There was a last-minute drive attempt by Tennessee, but they could not get it in the end zone. They did run out of time. So Tennessee's coming into this game reeling a little bit. The last two performances weren't great. Tennessee put up some really big offensive numbers against far inferior teams, but now the SEC play has come in. Nico Iamaleava has been exposed a little bit over the last.
Iamaleava. A Tennessee
I,
friend just educated me on the
I
pronunciation.
I've been like looking at all the pronunciations today. I was trying.
Iamaleava. That is
Yeah.
according to my Tennessee friend in Charleston here.
All
That's
right.
just
I'm just gonna call him Nico from here on out. I
Nico
can't get that one
Vowels.
wrong.
Like we call them DJ Vowels in NFS.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's crazy is that this game opened up as a Tennessee minus 20. It went down to minus 15 and a half, and now it's down to minus 15, depending on some of the books that you look at. ESPN FBI still really hasn't moved. 87% chance that Tennessee has to win versus Florida's 13. Excuse me. But Nico has thrown over 1,000 yards this season, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and they've done a lot of stuff through the air, but also their ground game has been very, very strong. And in this rivalry, historically speaking, the team that can run the ball the best tends to win this matchup. So Florida will have to be on their A game here. Dylan Sampson, pretty good running back, averaging 6.5 yards a carry and 12 touchdowns to date. So that is a very impressive showing thus far for the junior out of
In
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
fairness, in fairness, that's kind of what happens when you face teams that you can beat by 60, 70 points.
True. And
That's still
that
impressive.
is what you should do against those teams, and they've done it. Now, but to your point, they haven't been able to do it yet against the better teams of the SEC. So I think in this matchup, really the story has got to be for Tennessee. Can they get their offensive mojo back against the Gators, a defense that finally starting to show a little bit of life after their game last week against UCF, a team, by the way, which ran the football very effectively against far inferior opponents and then has been exposed on the back end against better teams like Colorado and then Florida. Tennessee, similar thing has happened to them over the last couple of weeks. So we're going to see in this matchup if that carries over. But I still think there are the concerns there because Tennessee, 2 years ago in this game, put up over 500 yards of offense. This year, I think at home under the lights, Knoxville is going to be rocking. They're going to be ready for this matchup. So, what are you looking for out of Tennessee in this game? I mean, I think the biggest key for me in them is the run game and how they're effectively able to run the ball against our defense. But what say you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this more in the keys to the game at the end, but I think for Florida, the issue is going to be just making sure that one mistake doesn't become 10. Because, like you said, night game, it's rocking. People there don't like you, and they're pretty open about it. Last time we were there, I think they changed it F you, Florida, but they said the actual word that we can't use or we'll get hit with a limited ads restriction. But they don't like you, and you know that. And when you make a mistake, they're going to be cheering their lungs out. Do you then just calm down? No pun intended here, but weather the storm? Do you keep it together? Do you completely unfurl and let them just run away from you? I think that the mental aspect of this game is going to come into play in a big way because Florida, if you look at the 247 sports talent composite, Florida's the better team.
Yep.
Now, they haven't looked it. Tennessee has their problems, but they've looked far and away better than Florida. But according to 247 sports talent composite, Florida is the number 12 team in the country talent wise, and Tennessee sits several spots behind them at number
17.
17. So you should win the game. But they also have clearly the better X's and O's coach. They also have the home field advantage. And I think in a lot of areas on the field, they have more continuity than we do. We have just overturned our roster again. Now, we also have a constant at quarterback in Graham Mertz, and they have a new guy, Nico Iamaleava, but he's also now 4 or 5 games in. He's going to be more comfortable and he's going to hit some throws. You're going to bust some coverages at some point. I'm sure you're going to miss assignments. Something's going to go wrong. Do you just hang your heads and let it just steamroll on you? Or do you buckle up? Do you do what you're supposed to do? Say, hey, that's on me. I messed up. Let's fix this. Let's get back out there and let's do the right things and show that there's some real proof in the pudding to that talking point we've all been we've been circulating about Napier really having the locker room under control. Like we saw that clip after the Central Florida game. You like that? And everyone goes, yeah. And they love him. Or so it seems. Do they love him enough to continue to show that they've bought into him and show that they're willing to go through a brick wall and do what they have to do for him when things are not going well? Because it's easy to do that when you just beat a team that's been running their yappers for 7 years straight. It's a lot different when you're on the other side of things and things aren't going well. So let's see the Gators string together some consistency so that they, obviously don't have things go wrong in the first place. But then if and when they do, buckle down, make the plays you have to make, and don't let it snowball into something worse.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you have to overcome the adversity on the field, to borrow an old Will Muschamp line, and that Florida is going to get punched in the mouth in this game. There's no doubt about it. Tennessee has played much better in the last couple of years under Josh Heupel than they have under Billy Napier. Josh Heupel is building a very solid program up in Knoxville right now, and Florida is still trying to figure themselves out under the Billy Napier regime. And if we say what we believe here, that Napier is under the gun, he is a potential lame duck coach at this point. Like you said, how do the players respond to that? I think we'll kind of talk. We have a segment here coming up where we're going to be talking about kind of what it would mean for Florida to win this game, as well as what would it take for us to regain faith in Napier. But this is eerily similar now at the point in like come back in the Will Muschamp era, right? The year he got fired. I think after the Missouri game, people kind of knew the writing was on the wall, and we said something similar after the Miami and Texas A&M game. We're at that like weird point right now where the team also senses it, but they're fighting for their head coach's survival because they do love the coach. And I think a lot of the fans will like we talked about, like Billy Napier as a person, and these guys are going to play for him out of respect to him. But I think we're at that point where guys are going to give all they have. And Billy Napier might ultimately go down, but I think right now we're at the stage where he goes down swinging. And we do have a fight on our hands in Knoxville. And also, this is a rivalry game. These guys, a lot of them were on this team last year when they beat Tennessee at home. Some of them were there even 2 years ago when they fell in Knoxville. They want to get a win in Knoxville in an important rivalry game. And if you do get this win, your chances of making a bowl game infinitely go up. So there's a lot riding on this potential upset for Florida. And we'll see if they can get it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the keys in which it'll take to get them there. So, Neil, I want to bring in this conversation because this was making the rounds from Crane and Company. It's a podcast out there on the Daily Wire, and they had a segment that said Florida fans should actually be rooting for a loss this weekend. I have my thoughts.
Yeah.
What do you say? What are your thoughts, and what is your reaction to somebody saying that Gator fans should be rooting for a loss?
Okay. So here's the argument. It's not crazy. I don't agree with it, but it's not crazy. Here's the argument. A win over Tennessee does not magically transform Billy Napier into Nick Saban. Winning this one game does not magically make up for years of getting punked on the recruiting trail by John Ruiz in Miami, not to mention Georgia and Alabama, and even Mississippi, and their very well organized Grove collective. Winning this one game does not install a true offensive genius, an offensive coordinator. It does not mean the right side of Florida's offensive line has magically been fixed, nor does it, we want to zoom out, nor does it instantaneously transform Scott Strickland into an aggressive, proactive, NIL-focused and NIL-friendly AD. It took a lot more than one game for Billy Napier to bury himself in this hole in the first place. And it's going to take a lot more than one game for him to get himself out of it. And again, zooming out beyond Napier, the entire athletic department at Florida has got to be destroyed and rebuilt from scratch if Florida is ever going to compete for titles again. Beating Tennessee on the road does not do that. What it actually does is stacks more sand into the hourglass and delays the demolition that we need that has to precede the reconstruction that this program desperately needs. And Tennessee, like I said, hasn't looked great this year. So Arkansas showed us that they're very, very beatable. Nico Iamaleava is talented and he's done some good things, but he's also done some not good things. They do have a good defense. They have a very capable offense, but they're far from invincible. Now, you have to also factor additional things into play here, like the fact that Josh Heupel is 1 million times the in-game coach, the X's and O's mind that Billy Napier is, and that probably, if not evens the talent disparity that 247 Sports claims is there, it probably shifts things in Tennessee's favor and means that what you've seen is not a mistake, that Tennessee is indeed the better team than Florida. Your eyes are not deceiving you. But I also got to give Napier credit that he pulled this team back together. I will say there was a lot of infighting and finger pointing the first 3 weeks. That was an ugly locker room scene after the Miami and A&M game. Somehow he glued it back together. So that's great. But anyway, if Florida beats Tennessee as a 16-point underdog, the pundits are going to call it an upset. A portion of Florida fans, for sure, probably the overwhelming majority, are going to be elated at the victory. Well, they're 4-2 now. They got a road win. All the kinds of headlines that we've dreamed about the Gators are back. They take down Tennessee, rocky bottom again in Knoxville. All of that is going to be a lot of fun. But if the Gators get that win, then they beat Kentucky at home, which is not a stretch. And then they beat a terrible FSU team in Tallahassee. Well, there's your 6. Billy Napier gets Florida to a bowl game. And all of a sudden, Napier, according to the pundits who said he has to make a bowl game to save his job, will have done that. Now, in that scenario, Billy Napier will have coached at Florida for 3 years. 6-6 in year 1, 5-7 in year 2, 6-6 in year 3. Or if you want to include the bowl games, so we're not going to be like FSU fans, we can say 6-7, 5-7, and just for argument's sake, I'll be generous. I'm a nice guy sometimes, just not the Central Florida fans, but I can be a nice guy. I'll give him a bowl win. So we'll say he's 6-7, 5-7, and 7-6, and that puts him at 18-20. That is objectively not good enough. It is not close to good enough. End of conversation. We do not lower the standards at Florida just because he is a nice guy, just because he can recruit an elite quarterback talent, or just because he has this army of staffers, or any other reason. There's no reason to lower the standards. But according to some, there are going to be people in positions of power who do that. The boosters, by the way, have had enough. They're done. But Scott Strickland still has the ultimate call. Somehow, the boosters have not lost their patience with him. And then there's the chairman of the board, Maury Hosseini, and the board of trustees, and all those people who don't really care. So what's going to happen is he is going to essentially become the football version of Mike White if he takes those steps to improve just enough as a coach in terms of pure production we're talking about. The Gators are going to be just good enough on a yearly basis where he doesn't lose his job, and he can start churning out 7-5, 8-4, 7-5, 6-6, 8-4, stray 9-3, back to 7-5, 8-4, and then you're stuck in mediocrity. And that is the most dangerous place where a program can possibly be, because that is when the fans stop caring. That is when the fans stop paying for tickets. That is when the thousands of empty seats as opposed to hundreds in every home game lead to the conversation of, yeah, let's shrink the stadium capacity by 15,000 seats, really starts to kick into high gear. That's when you then lose those 15,000 seats. That's when the competitive advantage you have in the swamp is reduced because the decibel level is reduced. And that is when the Gator program just has a big bite taken out of it from which it cannot recover. You're not going to take those seats out just to put them back. It's gone. You're done. You've lost them. It's over. So if you're going to not win championships, the argument goes, if you're not going to win titles, you may as well just suck, because then if you're just outright awful, at least then you can pull the plug and start over from scratch. And at least then there is some hope, there is some excitement, there is some realistic hype when you get the new coach in that you can maybe turn things around. If you're stuck in mediocrity, you don't get any of that. There's no titles for you. You're not a laughing stock. Mike White, again, in basketball was not horrible, but he wasn't very good either. And the Gators just sat there as the dust kept piling up on their last SEC and national championship trophies. I don't want that for football, and I think a win over Tennessee does pave the way for that. So that's the argument. And I don't hate it. It makes sense. It's logical. I don't want the Gators to be stuck in mediocrity in football, because then that's going to mean we're going to go 10, 15 years down the road. We blink our eyes and all of a sudden another generation of time has passed and we don't have anything to show for it. No titles, no CFP appearances, nothing. We're just 7-5, 8-4, 9-3. And eventually I figure the Gators will get tired of it. Either Strickland will get fired or the chairman of the board, Maury Hosseini, will be replaced by someone who will be more aggressive and pull the plug, but it's going to just stack more and more sand in that hourglass. So that's the argument. Now, the other side of this, all right, I'll back up a little bit. I'll go back and redefine what in all kinds of weather is supposed to be as a brand. We're not pure media. I don't ever want that, because that comes with a cost of authenticity. But we're also not just pure rabid fans when we do these shows or write articles either. We're a hybrid offspring of the two concepts of fan and media. There are elements of journalism. We fact check everything we say. The truth is our ultimate agenda, and reality is our ultimate goal to push on people. We're able to set aside our fandom and be objective, but we are Gator fans. So I try to mix those two liquid elements together to form a compound liquid product whenever possible. But for this particular topic, I'm going to break the compound down into two elements and break it up into two answers. Should we, as Gators, root for Florida to lose and therefore guarantee you slam the door shut on Billy Napier's survival? Actually, I'd argue the door is already shut. We're just putting caulk in it at this point. Do we want to trade a win over Tennessee for another year of Billy Napier? The objective media side of me says no. We don't want it, because at an early age, I learned you don't trade what you want in the long term for short-term gratification. So speaking purely objectively, no, I don't believe in Billy Napier as Florida's head coach. And I truly do believe the best thing for the program is for him to be fired ASAP, deal with the short-term fallout, possibly even tank the recruiting class, and in exchange, get the right guy to lead the program for the next decade. But the fan side of me can't bear to do that, because beating Tennessee would be hysterical this year, in that our worst coach ever would own them. 17 of the last 19 becomes 18 of the last 20, and we suddenly do remember how to win in Knoxville. It's not just, well, we have a curse, a hex, a voodoo, whatever, put on you in Gainesville. No, we just own you, period. It's not the location. You got two flukes to work out in your favor. They just both happen to be in Knoxville, but it's you as a program, Tennessee, that we own. It's not just because we play you in September, because we win this one and then we will have won against them in December and in October this decade. So again, I can't bring myself to root for a loss. I also can't fight back against the narrative that a loss is good for the Gators, because I believe it is.
Okay, I will. I'll push back against it. You should never root for your team to lose. Period. End of discussion.
And I'm
End
not.
of discussion.
I'm not.
And I'm not.
I
I'm
said
not
I'm
talking. I'm not talking about. I'm not talking you. I'm talking just in general for the
Okay.
premises of the argument. You should never root for your team to lose a game, even if it means it prolongs your coach staying here. In my opinion, I'm a competitor. I'm not a loser. This is a rivalry where we've won 17 of the last 19. We've talked about how we've won 30 out of 38 since the fall of Saigon at the top of the show. No, we need to go to Knoxville. We need to win this game because we're Florida, and we beat Tennessee. Does a duck pull a truck, like Marco Wilson or Quincy Wilson said that one time?
That's the reference you come up with? We lost that game.
I know. But like, I just remember that's what I was like. Florida beats Tennessee. Florida beats Tennessee. We should always root for that. We should root then for the Gators to beat Kentucky the following weekend. We should root for them to beat Georgia and Texas and everybody. This stuff does not happen in a vacuum. And one win against Tennessee isn't going to change the fact that Billy Napier isn't going to cut it here as Florida football's head coach. He will eventually do himself in, okay? Regardless of he wins. And we even said too, like 6-6 might not honestly cut it anymore with the results that we've seen early on in the season. So to in the short answer, no, we should root for a win this Saturday. And I also, at the same time, don't think it changes the trajectory of the Billy Napier regime. I still think he probably is no longer the head coach by the end of the season. He could then turn around the following week against Kentucky and lose, and we're back to square one, 4-3, heading into a bye week before Georgia. And at that point, he's cooked. He really is cooked because there's almost no chance you pull an upset against Georgia and Texas. You'll have a losing record going into mid-November, and the chances of making a bowl game are almost slim to none because we're going to be underdogs against Ole Miss and LSU, and probably slight favor against FSU. So, guys, the reality is whether we pull an upset this week or not, Napier is not going to be the head coach much longer at Florida. That's what I believe. So I think Florida fans should root for their team all the way by the end of this, and we'll pick the pieces up wherever they fall at the end. And basketball and football are slightly different in that there are a lot more games to play, and there's a 68 team tournament that decides a national champion. So there's a lot more wiggle room for a coach to give a little bit more of a runway if they are consistently making the tournament, which unfortunately Mike White was doing so on a consistent basis. And that's what prolonged the inevitable. Billy Napier has only made one bowl game through 2.5 seasons at Florida. He may not make one in his third. So I just think all in all, it was just a weird thing, and obviously a soundbite that now we're talking about, and I think some of the fans have talked about on Twitter this week. But you know what? I want to put boot to you know what up there in Knoxville. I want to win this game. I want to get a rivalry win. I want to feel good about this team for another week. Like ultimately, like at the end of the day, Napier, because of who he is, will unfortunately do himself in the end. And look at Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp in 2014, after getting obliterated at home by Missouri, turned around 2 weeks later and upset Mark Richt in Jacksonville. And then a few weeks after that, he lost to South Carolina after blowing a late lead at home in the fourth quarter and was fired the next day. Coaches that don't make it at Florida will ultimately find a way to do themselves in one way or another. And if that's the case with Napier, it's going to happen here again. So I think this whole thing, this whole discussion, that really just puts a bow on it and wraps it up is that Napier is who he is. Like you said in many other podcasts, he is a loser by record at Florida, the worst record coach since pre-World War II. He is going to do himself in at the end. So
Well, so all right. A bunch of counters there. Number one, there's absolutely zero justification for him being here right now. Texas A&M should have been the immediate guillotine drop. He should not
I
have gotten
agree.
Mississippi State. That's
I
the first
agree.
thing. The second thing is, to me, the argument that Jake Crane was making was predicated on the thesis that Napier uses this game as a springboard to improve himself from
Mhm.
being a 5-7, 6-6 coach to a 7-5, 8-4 coach. That was what I was talking about with getting parked in mediocrity with Mike White. Because to be very, very clear, Billy Napier is significantly less successful in his sport relative to what Mike White was in
Yeah,
basketball. The
you're right.
fear is that he improves in terms of the production he brings out of the Gator program every single year, from the point of just being a complete and utter disaster to meh, mediocre,
True
mid,
mediocre, true mediocrity.
so.
Because
And
we're not even
that
mediocre right now. Yeah,
that's
I see.
right. He has to improve to get to mediocre. The fear is that beating Tennessee is a launching pad for him to reach that plateau of mediocrity. I don't believe it. I don't think he's capable of it. I think that he is a loser. Like I've said, I mean, he's 14-16 right now. If he beats Tennessee, he's 15-16. Still a losing record.
Yeah.
Even if he gets to 8-4 this year, let's just say that he will still have been at Florida for 3 years and barely have a winning record. And
Right.
two of
And
his first three seasons will have been losing seasons. He has
yeah,
so far to go to get to that mediocre platform. Because then the issue becomes, well, you have the same schedule again next year. How do you replicate 8-4 next year? Do you improve on it, or do you take a step back next year? The long-term questions get louder and louder and louder. And if Napier is truly, I'm going to use the word somewhat cosmically here, but if Napier is in danger of, or if the Florida program is in danger of Billy Napier improving to the point of, and no further than mediocrity, you'd rather just cut the head off before it even gets there. So I get that. I don't agree with it. Like you said, I want Florida to win. That bragging right, if we beat Tennessee, is going to be absolutely hilarious. It is going to be one of the funniest wins. I talked about like 2008 being a funny win because their fans were so mad that we were just toying with them and not blowing them out. This is going to top it. This is going to be more hysterical than that. I will never let them live it down if Florida wins this game. And like you said, Napier will, because he's a loser, find a way to lose more games and he will get himself fired. So
Yep.
I'm not too worried about it, but I'm saying I think the argument is rational.
Fair. I mean, I don't agree with that at the end, but that's fine. I mean, that's why you have both of us here to kind of trade off that and give differing opinions on it. But at the end of the day, I think it begs the question is that, and okay, if Napier does win against Tennessee, then what does he have to do to get back into eventually the good graces of truly staying in Florida? Because to me, we've talked about it, it's going to take 7 wins to save his job. And the path to that, then after you beat Tennessee, is you have to turn around the following week and beat Kentucky at home. That is not a guarantee. Like, we have not beaten Kentucky since 2020. Mark Stoops has had Florida's record now through 2 different coaches. He went on the road and beat Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin just 2 weeks ago. He could absolutely come into the swamp and do it again. This is routine for them now. And then you play Georgia, number 5 in the country. You play number 1 Texas at Texas. And then you go home and you play an LSU team. We'll see how good they are in November. But that's a team that's had Florida's number certainly since 2018. And then Ole Miss 2019, or Ole Miss, they are a by and large much better football team than Florida is from an X's and O standpoint. And then FSU. So FSU is the one where Florida right now is probably favored. Florida maybe a slight favorite against Kentucky. Those are only 2 more wins on the schedule, what we just talked about. So that only gets Florida to 6 wins. That in order to get the 7th, they're going to have to pull another upset somewhere else down the line against the team that they just have not performed better than. And then even get the 8th win, that would require another upset. So we're looking at 1 to 2 more upsets and you win the remainder of your 50-50 games, which has not been a guarantee for Florida, which is why I said it, ultimately he's going to do himself in here because I don't think he's going to be able to get through all of that unscathed. I don't see it. I think there'll be something down the line. Napier will ultimately, unfortunately, do himself in. I'm not rooting for it. I'm rooting for Florida to win every single weekend, but just looking at what he's got to do to get back in the good graces with the fan base, what we just talked about, and looking at that schedule, I do not see it. And on top of that, I would say if he gets a bowl game, you really got to win a bowl game. You haven't won a bowl game now since the 2019 season when we played in the Orange Bowl against Virginia. So there's even a bigger picture here that Florida needs to start getting back to the things that they were doing on a routine basis before the Napier era, which is winning at least 8 to 9, 10 games a season and winning bowl games, competing for a college football playoff berth, which is what they would have done in the Dan Mullen era in his first 3 seasons. If the college football playoff, as its new format exists now, he would have made it all the first 3 seasons of his tenure. And I think honestly, the tenure of Dan Mullen might have remained intact for another season because he would have at least had the argument that he was a national title contender through, like, legitimately in his first 3 years. Napier cannot get on that. He's got to get back to that point of square one where we're at least competing for those sorts of things. And the pathway to do that this season is non-existent, in my opinion. And in order to even have a chance at getting to that, to fight for 2025, he's going to have to get to 7 wins, which would require 2 more upsets on the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, 7-5 is the benchmark we set in the offseason. We pinpointed it. We said, no, I will not. I think you said 8-4 even, but I said,
well, I predicted an 8-4 season, which is crazy. I feel stupid now for doing that, but I said 6-6. I could see him being back depending on how it looked, the style
okay.
of it, which is dumb that now that I think about that,
He's
the
not off
style
to a good
shouldn't
start in
matter.
that department,
He's
by the
not.
way, after
No,
Miami and
no.
A&M just blew him out. Yeah, I mean, I pinpointed 7-5. I said the number is 7 wins. For him to even deserve a conversation to come back is 7-5. Anything beyond that, no, gone. I don't care. I don't care who's injured. I don't care what it looks like. Goodbye. No, not hearing it. For him to actually regain my faith, he doesn't. Honest to God, he doesn't. It's not anything, personal. It's nothing punitive. It just goes back to what I said at the start of the season. 7-5 in the regular season is my bare minimum metric for me to even being willing to consider seeing a 4 season. I'm not moving the goalpost on that. I said 7-5, and I'm sticking to that. If he goes 7-5, I will roll my eyes and I will continue to criticize him all off season long because he will deserve it with the 2 losses that have already piled up and 3 more that we haven't even seen yet coming on top of them. But I will refrain from just absolutely tearing into him in the offseason. I'll criticize him, but I won't just deride him, I guess is a better word. I won't be so dismissive and derisive if he goes 7-5 versus if he goes 6-6 and comes back, I'll just dismiss it out of hand. I won't even hear the argument that he deserves it. But for him to actually regain my faith, I need 9-3. And I don't really care how hard the schedule is.
9-3 this season. This
Yeah,
season.
I don't
Okay.
care how hard the
Like
schedule is.
that. So let me
Go
let me
beat Georgia. Go beat Georgia. You
yeah.
want to regain my
So
faith? Go beat Georgia.
yeah.
That's
I mean,
that's what
like
it'll take.
if so then okay, so then yeah, so Tennessee, you beat Kentucky, and you beat Georgia, which would put us at 6-2, and that would be 4 consecutive wins, which he's never done. I think the what's the best win streak he's had is
Three.
two, right? Three.
Uh,
Yeah,
no,
last year. No, last year
yeah,
against
three,
he
three.
after the Utah loss, he won three in a row. Yeah. That's yeah, I mean, he's never had longer than a three
Which two of
game
them
win
were against
streak.
joke opponents, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
McNeese and Charlotte.
Charlotte wasn't even that pretty of a game.
Yep.
And you know what? I'll even say this. I'll put it this way: win out aside from Texas. The loss has to be to Texas because first of all, it's completely unrealistic to think that Florida is going to beat both Georgia and Texas. So
Right.
that's the first thing. The second thing is there's no other game in there that I can accept a loss to. I'm not going to tolerate another loss to Kentucky in the swamp. Unacceptable. I don't,
Oh,
I don't care if
absolutely
he
not. He
wins
should
out
be
after
fired.
that.
He shouldn't be able to leave the
Yeah,
field.
I don't right. He shouldn't get the games after it. And frankly, I don't even care if he wins out after that because it's so much more than just the wins and losses at this point. I'm sick and tired of the ways in which he operates, both on and off the field. And like I said about Tennessee, with 1 win, not erasing all those issues, even winning those, I mean, it won't happen. Like, let's be real.
Yeah,
Florida's not
it's
going
not
to
going
win
to
all
happen.
four.
And that's what
But
the impetus for my response to the whole argument of like you should be rooting for them to lose. The fact of the matter is he's going to do it on his own. Like
yeah,
he's not going to beat Georgia. He's not going to beat Texas. I don't think he's going to. He may not even beat LSU and Ole Miss. Like the chances of him even splitting, going 1-1 in that stretch is pretty small. Like it's below
yeah.
40%. So I think that this whole thing is probably we've wasted probably more time than we need to on this whole conversation. But I agree with you, the only way he survives is he's going to have to pull probably 2 to 3 or to gain my trust. I guess that was the
Yeah.
question.
To gain the
Gain my
trust, not
trust.
to,
He
yes.
would he has to win two, maybe to upset two out of 2 to 3 teams. And yes, starting to beat your rivals on a consistent basis
Yep.
is a way to do that. Like Tennessee is a rival, Georgia is a rival, LSU is a rival, Florida State is a rival you haven't beat yet in your first 2 seasons. Those are games like if you could win, if you got 4 rivalry wins to close out the season, absolutely. I actually would be willing to say, you know what, Billy, you've earned another year.
And for
Seriously.
God's sake, start showing some pride on your home field. I mean, I
Yeah.
walked out of the swamp after the Miami and A&M games just embarrassed.
Dejected.
I was just
Absolutely.
embarrassed
Yeah.
to be wearing orange and blue. Now, I did it and I'll do it again every single week, but I was embarrassed to walk out of
Yeah.
that stadium. I won't tolerate a loss to Kentucky. Like
Yeah.
even if you go to Tennessee and you blow them out,
Oh yeah.
let's say Florida covers the spread for them. Let's say Florida wins by 3 touchdowns, and then you turn around and lose to Kentucky. No, gone.
I'm
I'm
telling you,
done.
it's his South Carolina. It's his South Carolina, like Will Muschamp in 2014. Like
Yeah.
you turn around and you upset a team like Tennessee and you turn around and lose at home the following week, you're fired. Like I mean that's the end of that's it's curtains for me at that point. You got to be consistently winning football games in order to be the head coach at the University of Florida.
I can't really. All right, so I have to amend the statement slightly. I can't really say that. I will watch Florida beat Georgia and Texas and LSU and Ole Miss and FSU, 5 straight wins to end the year and not want him back. I mean, I can't say that, but I guess the way I should have said it was if you lose to Kentucky, he shouldn't get the chance to coach those games because
Yes,
if
yes, yes.
but if he does lose to Kentucky and he does win all 5 of those games, I mean, come on, you can't want him fired at that point. If you're going to talk about winning at Texas and then beating Georgia and then beating LSU and Ole Miss and FSU, you can't want him fired at that point. But I need 9-3, and you have to beat Georgia. That's what it'll take for him to and Tennessee and FSU and LSU. You can lose.
Yeah.
You can lose to
Ole
um
Miss and Texas. Can you lose to Ole Miss
See,
and Texas if he
I
wins
don't want to
those?
be accepting more home losses. I'm tired of it. I have
Fair,
season
no,
tickets.
fair.
I drive down five
Hey,
hours one way each week to
yeah,
watch the Gators play. I'm sick and tired of walking out of that stadium
yeah.
embarrassed.
A lot of people do, Neil. A lot of people do that stuff. I mean, I agree. At the end of the
I'm
day,
not
I
saying, yeah, I'm
agree.
not saying I'm the only one. I should have said we collectively. Enough. Start winning games on your home field. Just freaking sometimes.
Yeah,
Jesus, Central Florida was the first time we beat an FBS team at home in an entire revolution of our planet. An
yeah, felt
entire
good.
year.
Yeah, felt good. Felt good for once. Felt like
Yeah,
old
I've
times.
forgotten what that
But
felt like.
absolutely, hopefully, well, hey, I hope it keeps continuing. But
I do too.
all right, nonetheless, I think we've established it. It's going to take some rivalry wins. It's going to take some major upsets in order for us to regain our faith here in Napier. So we got a game. We should talk about that game just a little bit more and from an X's and O's and standpoint in our matchups here. The Gators coming into this game are still going to go with the two quarterback system, DJ Lagway, Graham Mertz. To date, DJ Lagway is actually still the leading passer by 1 yard, 667 yards to 666 for Mertz. That is how impressive that Sanford performance was for Lagway when he put up 456 of those 667 yards. So all indications are that that will continue for this game. And on top of that, though, Florida could be getting a shot in the arm from its already impressive receiving core with the return of Eugene Trey Wilson, who did warm up against UCF, did not play. I do believe he's going to play for this game. We'll see an injury report probably come out here in the next day or so for the Gators on the availability front, but all indications are he is trending toward returning for the first time since I believe it's the Sanford game. He has not played since the Sanford game. So that would be huge because you couple him with Elijah Badger, you couple him with Chimere Dika, who's been very impressive. And then, of course, Tank Hawkins has emerged in this last game. If you could even get Aiden Mizell, then it's truly icing on the cake there. So Florida certainly has some weapons that it could utilize in the passing game to be able to beat Tennessee here. But I think, Neil, really, in my opinion, for Florida to win this game, it goes down to the line of scrimmage in the run game. Can Florida run the football? And they've done it very effectively on the outside. Austin Barber and Jake Slaughter have been incredibly impressive in run protection as well as pass protection, but run protection especially when they're pulling to the left and right side and running laterally across the field. It has sprung several runs. Montreal Johnson Jr. is a solid back, but of course, Jaden Baugh, Jacoby Jackson have emerged as leaders in this backfield over the last 2 weeks, and we're hoping to see them continue to get more involved in this game. And then obviously the defensive side of things, Florida made huge strides in the last week where they put on a huge defensive performance, the 5 sacks, 7 tackles for losses, and of course, finishing it off with the interception. I think for the Gators to have a chance in this game on the defensive side, they're going to have to force turnovers for the first time, maybe on a bigger clip than they have in the past. And we'll be looking to see how involved Austin Armstrong is on the sideline. For the first time all season, he was down on the sideline against UCF, indicating to me that he's a lot more involved in the play calling and personnel decision making for this game or for the games and moving forward for the Gators. So, and of course, everybody knows what Austin Armstrong's masterpiece was against Josh Heupel last year. Put the game tape out there on how to beat them. And of course, the last week, Arkansas did it again. So, Florida, I definitely think, has a puncher's chance in this game. So, let's get our keys here. Let's get our final verdict, our chance to win, and our score prediction. Neil, I know you've been writing it down. Florida, like I mentioned, a 15 to 16 point underdog in this game. Neil, what are your keys though for Florida to pull the upset?
He's to me, like I said earlier, Florida's going to have to just play smart and again, no pun intended with the Hurricane Milton, but weather the storm because you know it's coming. You know there's going to be a time when someone messes up and it's probably going to hurt the Gators as a football team. Maybe the right side of the line misses a block. That's been a popular one this year. And Mertz gets strip sacked. Maybe DJ Lagway has a freshman moment. Maybe he misses a throw by 10 feet and it's picked off and run back 60 yards and sets up a touchdown for Tennessee. How do the Gators respond to that? How do they move on from it and not let one mistake become absolutely fatal? For Tennessee, I think it's pretty simple. Tennessee just has to use their brawn in the trenches to dominate Florida because we've seen the two real opponents Florida's faced so far in Miami and Texas A&M. Sorry, Central Florida, but you don't qualify as a real opponent. Miami and A&M dominated Florida, just absolutely obliterated Florida. And they have talent in the trenches, but I don't think that they have so much talent that they should have been dominating Florida on the game tape like they were. If Tennessee's offensive line can get that kind of push against Florida's front and prove that it was just because Central Florida's not that good, that Florida's defense looked that good against them, the Vols are going to win the game. They'll give Nico time to throw. They'll let him go through his progressions. They'll open up holes in the running game. And then the same on the other side, too. They can eat against our offensive line if they look anything the way that A&M and Miami look. They have the horses there. They have pieces there. And I think they have two guys with 4 sacks already on the year. So they can get production from across the line there. They can destroy Florida's game plan just by destroying the right side of the offensive line. So you have the talent there to make Florida look silly because you have about as much talent there as A&M and Miami did. Use it, show it, put it on tape. And I think the Vols are going to win if they can do that.
Yeah. Well, I think the Gators ultimately, like I mentioned, I think for me the key is can they get 150 yards more or rushing the football? That's going to be my stat for the game.
Yeah,
Is the team that can
padlock
rush?
stat, padlock it.
I agree. That's my padlock stat. Whoever runs for 150 yards or more will win this game. I think that team will probably have rushed for the most yards. I'd be shocked if it were even a higher number. And then the other one is turnover margin. Florida has got to, I think, win the turnover margin by +2. They got to be +2 in this game, and they got to run for over 150 yards to win the game. Because for me, that would mean they've controlled the line of scrimmage really, really well. So those are my two key. Those are my keys for the game. And I think I'm really curious to see how this quarterback situation plays out. Lagway proved 2 weeks ago in Mississippi State he could play well on the road. That, albeit, is a much tamer road environment than what he's going to see Saturday night. So when he gets his possessions, how does he look? Are we seeing those dimes through the seam like we saw to Chimere at home, or does he revert back to some of those bad passes and performances against Texas A&M? We're going to see on Saturday. So that's kind of maybe an X factor. Can we get that big play from Lagway when he is in the game on a road environment? Because let me tell you, if you have a young freshman quarterback going into Knoxville and taking Florida down the field and scoring touchdowns, what a statement that makes to your team that you've got it. And I think that's maybe a little X factor key to an upset here is that the momentum of seeing a young 18-year-old freshman going the distance on the road at night. That's the stuff where legends are made early in the SEC. I think back to like Emmitt Smith breaking a freshman record against Alabama on the road in his freshman season. You look back in the Tennessee rivalry back in 2006, Tim Tebow on that 4th-and-1 play that extended the drive. Freshmen in the SEC who become legends make plays in these sorts of games. So X factor there, maybe my third key. What's DJ Lagway look like when he has the ball in his hand? So with all that said, Neil, time to give our chances to give the Gators to win and our ultimate score prediction. I'll let you go first. And I've written mine down right below. So you go ahead.
Well, you have to do them at the same time, I thought.
Oh, okay. Fair. Yeah, fair enough. All right. Here we go.
All right. There's a way to adjust this.
Oh,
Turn your
that's
blur off.
I got to turn my blur off for just a moment.
Yeah. Well, you're running away from a hurricane. You have an excuse.
There we
Not
go.
being the most. Okay. Okay. So
Okay.
we're
Not too far off. High scoring game. You got the over on I had mine just on the under. The over under on this game is 54 and a half. I have
Okay. And I
just on
have
the
Florida
under.
covering. Well, wait, is it 15 or 16 we're going by?
15, we'll go 15 and a half. That's fine. Yeah, you
All
got
right,
the
so
cover.
I
I
have
definitely
Florida
have the
covering.
I have a cover as well.
I don't think Florida gets embarrassed. For those of you listening on audio, I have 42-27 Tennessee and an 85% chance that Tennessee wins. I don't think that Florida gets humiliated in this game. I don't think it's anywhere near as one-sided as the Miami game was. But what did I say at the start of the season? Ever since the start of the season when we lost to Miami, and results started coming in. The team loses games. They find ways to lose. I don't know what form it takes. Like I said before, too. I mean, you can't know what's going to go wrong that day, but you know that Josh Heupel has a really nice system. You know that Nico Iamaleava is a very talented quarterback, and you know that Tennessee just played like you know what in the last game they played. And college football is a week to week thing. So I'm predicting that they're going to bounce back and look like world beaters on offense because let's face it, Florida's defense has a way of making offenses look like world beaters, even if they're not. I mean, Cam Ward has definitely showed his imperfections since playing Florida, but he looked like a Heisman Trophy winner in that game. So did Marcel Reed, by the way, in his first ever start. So Tennessee is much more comparable of a team to Miami and Texas A&M, the teams that have beaten Florida, than Tennessee is comparable to Samford or Mississippi State or Central Florida. So I think that it is also true that Florida has gotten a little bit better. I think that some of what we saw the last couple of weeks is for real. So I don't think it's a complete whitewashing, but and nor do I think it's the kind of game that like the A&M game was 33-7 and Florida scored late at the end to make it look close. I think this is a fairly close game throughout, but I think Tennessee is just a better team, even though Florida has more talent, according to 247 Sports composite rankings, and the better team will just make more plays down the stretch and win.
Yeah. Well, I picked the Gators to lose 30-24, and I gave us a 35% chance to win. I think the Gators are going to really fight in this game. I think we're going to see that fight from a team that's fighting for their head coach and carry some momentum and goodwill that they've created over the last couple of weeks. But ultimately, Tennessee, in my opinion, is the better team, the coach team in this game, the X's and O's factor, and they're playing at home at night. Those are just some factors I can't see the Gators overcoming. I do think they cover this game. I do think they make this game well into the fourth quarter. I think it's even a nail biter, or maybe Florida, maybe at the end, is trying to get the ball back, and Tennessee is able to just run the clock out. I kind of see it maybe as that situation with that score. But I think the Gators are going to fight in this game. I think they're going to put up some points. They may even have a lead at some point in it. But Tennessee at home with Josh Heupel is the better team right now. And unfortunately, I think this is just one of those games that's going to be another notch in the belt or tally against Billy Napier in his tenure, where his days are continuously going to be numbered here. So,
And but just
unfortunately,
very, 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 very quickly, this is not a game that Florida can lose by any score and be quote unquote embarrassed unless it's by like 60, like the Orange Bowl for FSU. Unless it's that bad, there's no score here that is going to, I think, add on to the case to fire Billy Napier. It's just simply we know what he is, and this
yep.
does nothing to change it. If he loses by 1 or if he loses by 31, it's just a continuation of the pattern of his teams finding ways to lose games. It doesn't move the needle because the needle is already off the scale. So it's not, well, Tennessee's a good team on the road. It's a rivalry game. It's at night. They're loud. No one's going to win that game. No coach is going to get Florida to win that game. Yeah, it's not about this game. It never will.
National championship coaches at Florida have won that game.
Yeah.
Urban Meyer, Steve
Right,
Spurrier won that
right.
game.
And
So
and so
that's to
the
my point
argument is
there.
Napier's not that. And if you're not a
Yeah.
national championship contending coach, although a national championship winning coach, you don't belong here. So that's the argument. But regardless, I have no pity for it's a really good team on the road you just faced. What do you expect? No, I don't want to hear it. I have no interest in hearing that argument because this decision that I reached, and I think you reached too, has nothing to do with this game.
No, yeah, it has nothing to do with this game. I think it's just kind of
It's the sum of the results.
it's
It's
some of
the
the
sum of
results.
the data.
It's where we got here. So
Yep.
unfortunate. But obviously, we both hope we're wrong. We both hope we come in here early next week and we talk about a Gator win. But regardless, we'll be watching this game. We love our Gators and all kinds of weather. We will all stick together. So I think that about does it, Neil. That's a good show. Make sure all of you, like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Yep.
hit that subscribe button down below, like our show here, leave a comment down below what the Gators got to do to pull the upset against Tennessee. And if you're listening on our audio platforms, please rate and review the show. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps us bring Gator Nation more great content. And of course, once again, all of our folks here in Florida that are going through Hurricane Milton, please stay safe. Prayers, all the best wishes to you and your family. We hope to see you in Gainesville just next week in the swamp. So from all of us here at the All Kinds Weather Forecast, your host Chris Yanes, alongside Neil Schulman, signing off from another great episode.